Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Agentic Document Extraction. It's going to be hosted by Erica Gilbert, my partner in crime.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. Our goals and agenda really are, well, I'll introduce myself, of course, but primarily the Agentic Document Extraction solution from LandingAI. So those who are not familiar will get sort of a recap. And then we'll walk through the complexity of document understanding with different industry use cases where we get sort of a full peek at the entire pipeline. Then we'll do a demonstration in our Agentic Document Extraction, or otherwise known as ADE, Visual Playground, and then use a Jupyter Notebook to process a set of data and ultimately output it into a spreadsheet. So you'll see sort of a full pipeline, though in this case, not like enterprise grade. And then, of course, wrap with a Q&A. I'm Erica Gilbert. I am a customer success engineer at LandingAI. I support our enterprise customers in the North America and European zones. I've been with the company just over 2 years, but I have quite a long history in technology, as you can see there. And even though it was kind of a long road to get to tech, and for fun, I love to go see live bands and art exhibits when I can. So great to meet everyone. All right, let's get into it. So what is Agentic Document Extraction? At its core, it really is an API designed to extract, enrich, and process complex documents without requiring templates or custom training. In this case, agentic means the system is intelligently handling your documents and producing structured outputs that are really easy to integrate into your downstream systems. So hopefully simplifying a lot of the complexity that we'll ultimately uncover today. So at a high level, there are really 4 key features that populate the Agentic Document Extraction sort of suite. And those, rely on the document processing itself. So parsing ADE segments into meaningful chunks that are grounded visually, so that extracted data can be traced back to its position in the document. And then specifically within the documents itself, pulling out very specific data points that you care about, like names or dates or amounts, and be very flexible about how that is defined. So you can define what you're extracting, or you can leverage some of our smart features to pull that out yourself. And then, of course, we want to enrich the existing data, especially if it's very visually complex. So that way, you're able to improve searchability and also downstream analytics without changing sort of the original text and or visual components. And then, of course, really key to this, and then part of what we're going to go through today, is providing enterprise grade security. So configurable privacy, and do pay attention to how your environment is configured. And you can read more about those features at va.landing.ai/plan. But we're configurable, from 0 data retention to GDPR grade protection. There's a lot of different feature sets that we've really thought about to protect all sorts of different use cases, some of which we'll talk about today, for example, in the healthcare space. And then of course, that is an evolving roadmap, which we'll touch on a little bit at the end. So if there are specific requirements you have, please reach out and share, because we are very customer driven in our roadmap directions. We also offer our Agentic Document Extraction capability natively in Snowflake, which is really valuable because it eliminates data movement and actually integrates directly within Cortex Search Cortex agents and notebooks. And it can also feed retrieval augmented generation, RAG pipelines, and vector search directly. So we offer both a connected app and a native app. So if you're an existing Snowflake customer and using that as your data layer, this is a really great way to leverage ADE and get it integrated into your existing pipelines. And then, where we think we sort of position ourselves in the space and why you should ultimately select LandingAI's ADE is really we are sort of the intelligent advantage. There's an enterprise software purchasing joke that when you're considering how to purchase, you can really only pick two when you're choosing between fast, accurate, cheap, or expensive. And that joke is that you can't have something be both fast, accurate, and inexpensive, meaning that you're trading sort of accuracy for affordability or speed for affordability. With the advances in technology and some of our proprietary tech, you're really able to get all of those. You don't have to just pick two anymore. So you can get very accelerated speed of processing of documents. You can get highly accurate and rich results, and you also get value to sort of support your enterprise initiatives that are scale based. So you don't have to pick anymore. And the acronym there is sort of FATE. All right, so we've discussed at a high level what agentic document extraction and processing is. We've recapped our technology that will ultimately power what we see in the walkthrough today, as well as what is already powering some of the industry use cases that we will discuss. So it's probably not news to many, but perhaps some of you are working on your own more independent applications that aren't maybe supporting a full enterprise business process. But even if you're a human and you print a piece of paper and then collect it and then mail it somewhere and then hope to be able to access that data somewhere in an application downstream, you get the idea that is inherently complex. So this is a good visual graph that shows, as part of the overall enterprise business process, there are tools and capability, of course, that our ADE LandingAI service is supporting. But there's also a lot that happens, in the full process that is outside of our ultimate scope. So there is a lot for our enterprise customers to think about when it comes to, the manual processes that are sort of sorting and collecting that data that may, work alongside of software processes that then ultimately need to be integrated into some sort of downstream system. So it helps to sort of simplify the workflow here, but it's very clear that there's a lot of setup and requires pretty significant orchestration. While much of it is programmatic, it makes sense that is why many enterprise businesses have full teams devoted to intelligent document processing, whether that's serving the legal business unit, the HR team, or even logistics and operations division, which we'll touch on those different use cases today. So here we go through the detail of a typical document processing pipeline. And we like to think of them as sort of three different chunks, but there's a lot of complexity and sort of different components within each of those three different major pipeline components. So first, what is upstream? There is complexity ultimately in bringing data from more than one channel. Is it coming from a messaging service or a mail app? Is it coming from file share or different knowledge bases? Are documents that are being shared in our chat systems placed in that knowledge base that then can be accessed? Do we need to do any document cleansing? A lot of times the technology is more advanced today, and that we see with our own capability that you don't need to do necessarily denoising or image cleaning. But you do also want to think about the metadata that is associated with that document, and how are you preserving it as it goes through these pipelines. And then also thinking about file normalization so that it can be a part of this process. So that is sort of the upstream main layer that we think about. And you might think about some of those sources where that data is coming from to be from Google Drive, Confluence, SharePoint, or even newer software like Notion. So right in the middle is the core of where we provide value and help accelerate business processes for our enterprise customers. And that is to, really intelligently extract quite a bit of information from those documents in question, and parsing a wide variety of different content. So looking at different handwriting, signatures, looking at bundles of documents that there are probably many different types of documents in one, handling data protection to ensure it's redact ready if needed in that format downstream. All of that is really critical as part of the main extraction process here. So really pulling that data out to make sure it can provide value in a format that makes sense downstream. So then the third final major chunk in the pipeline process is what happens after that data is intelligently extracted. Is there validation and normalization required? For example, do certain procedures need codes that are then tied to them to map correctly in the corresponding database? Is there a specific logic set up for the mapping system for invoices and payers to correlate? If this data is informing, dashboards downstream, what actually do you want to represent based on being given that data? For the entire pipeline, it's likely that you have many webhooks that are being facilitated and connected, and do those need to inform a automation of ultimately a decision? So a lot of questions to ask and a lot of complexity to support. And some examples of where you might see extracted data from these document processing pipelines are in software services such as Salesforce, or looking at things like HubSpot and Microsoft Dynamics, or in the analytics space with Tableau, or just looking at bigger ecosystems with Oracle and SAP. So really complex systems and setup. So now we look in a specific industry to understand, so what might be those business processes that ultimately are being partially or fully automated. And we have, come across these with our customers for know your customer and onboarding. So our service is able to process different IDs, utility bills, bank statements to facilitate accelerating verification, fraud reduction, and compliance. And then looking at mortgage and loan document process, which we'll go in a little bit more detail, but all of the different W-2s, pay stubs, and tax returns that you're working with there, as well as sort of financial statement extraction and analysis, looking at receipts and balance sheets to improve accounts payable accuracy and enable real-time insights. As well as looking in the tax space, we all are aware of the different and many forms that are a part of that one process, how far we've come with working with software to help facilitate and simplify those workflows. But, that can, just because the software is available today does not mean extracting the data is always accurate or simple. So here in our first example, we're pulling from, looking at a typical mortgage process. So of course you have borrower documents. So those are ingested. And And commonly, you would want to sort of type those documents to identify which key data pieces you might need to inform in your overall mortgage loan application. So whether that's a pay stub or a tax return or a bank statement, our ADE will extract and structure that data, and using our experimental feature, provide some confidence scores, and of course, the visual grounding of where ultimately that came from, to identify the source. And then it may be that as part of that process, or this could be a full, always supported by human review, underwriters review flagged conditions, so specific criteria based on the extracted output, or maybe those low confidence values that are identified, that it ultimately flows directly into the loan origination system. And I love this sort of icon here of all of the different documents a part of that overall process. And this describes a little bit with more detail the full pipeline. So that does include sort of automated classification, field extraction with enrichment, normalization, or validation, visual review for flagged cases, or maybe a part of all cases, different validation across your document set. And then, of course, the final decision being integrated into the enterprise system that provides an audit trail for compliance, but really critically for future reference. And then we look at this in the healthcare space. So a wide array of healthcare scenarios that require different processes with documents. So if we think about when we're working with our doctor to have prior authorization for specific doctors or procedures, medications, et cetera. There's, of course, clinical notes, referrals, and the goal is ultimately to accelerate that approval, reduce denials, and lower that administrative cost. The same for lab reports and diagnostic extraction. It really helps enhance the clinical decision-making from the pretty complex documents that have sort of radiology or pathology reports, and lab values and diagnostic data that might feed other systems of record for the patient and the provider to make those connections. And then, of course, looking at patient intake and medical forms, we all spend time in the waiting room filling those out, and we want to make sure that they improve wait times for us and help our doctors make more efficient decisions. And then, of course, working with our insurance providers to help automate extraction of claim details and explanation of benefits, to really speed that processing up and improve the revenue cycle management. So here we see that complex process for prior authorization. So someone will make a request. There may be many attachments that are ingested and classified, or not, just depends on what key details are needed. The patient, provider, and treatment details are usually pulled out. The provider software actually checks them against coverage rules, policy criteria, and potential fraud indicators. And then depending upon how the cases are identified, there's probably a set of criteria that puts them in a high confidence rating, and then they're auto approved. And then the biggest ones are flagged for that clinician review. And then, of course, hopefully, that system is tying into the visual grounding results to show sort of where and why that was flagged. So here we look at that, again, full pipeline. So a lot of this sort of repeats across the different steps, because as we highlighted with our three sort of upstream document extraction and downstream steps, the pipeline really requires that data extraction, criteria verification, and exception handling, many times with human review, to inform a final decision that's integrated into the payer system with an audit trail for compliance. So a lot involved behind the scenes every time you're working with sort of getting that authorization approved in this process. Last year, looking in sort of the logistics space, we think about our own selves and shipping, and also just the small businesses we work with, and how there is a massive documents associated with that, and a lot of that data needs to be ultimately tied together. I've seen working with different enterprise companies that they have thousands of vendors that they need to ultimately match in a payer system. Not hundreds, literally thousands, and everyone has their own invoice template. So the complexity of ensuring those vendors are paid on time is quite challenging, and that's really where an intelligent document processing solution is required. So here we see that sort of same setup where you have a variety of different document types that are the input. You have a potential human in the accounts payable staff reviewing flagged mismatches or low confident extractions. And ultimately, that's driven into downstream ERP or accounting system after that data is validated and collated and mapped across the different documents. So very complex process. As you can see here, our service will help support this by extracting and processing invoices, purchase orders, delivery notes, bills of lading. And those extractions can then be reviewed and connected for mismatches or anomalies. And then when there is those mismatches or anomalies, the human can come in and review and really provide a structured sort of reconciliation report that is updated in the ERP system. And that's really important to reduce the amount of time this is ultimately manually done, and help speed up the time in which people are ultimately paid out in those logistic processes. Here we just see some detail of where you may have a variety of invoices, and leveraging our field extraction capability. You can define your own custom schema to process these values across a high variety of documents. And you can also use our smart suggestion for the schemas based on the document type to really inform those downstream systems. And just another example, so we did mention this in sort of the upstream extraction and downstream slide, but also very common use case for working with document processing is a custom chatbot. So the agentic document extraction can power retrieval augmented generation by processing those documents, storing the structured content in an indexed database, and then allowing a large language model to answer questions, and then use the visual grounding to cite that back to the source. So those custom chatbots are really improving productivity in the enterprise and giving up-to-date answers, and making us a little smarter every day. Okay, so I realize we spent quite a bit of time sort of setting the stage of how you might automate or partially automate a business process in the enterprise. But now we'll actually go through our visual playground to get a sense of how powerful ultimately this is for intelligent document process, and apply that to your own tasks with a Jupyter notebook. So here I've just come to va.landing.ai, and you can select for the document extraction tool. So you can see I just would select for that here, or there's a couple different ways to click through it. Just to illuminate sort of our prior authorization use case, it's hard to find that kind of data sort of readily available. But here I have a authorization in working with the Veteran Affairs Department to disclose certain information and be able to get that back. So while this is a very legible form, it has a lot of complex information and goals sort of pertinent to the individual submitting, including, a not highly legible signature. If I sort of pull the document up here a little bit more. So this has been run through our intelligent service here, and now we see the output of that. So we have a lot of times in the systems, you are going to want to store and feed that full payload so that you can index and work with the content later. So we have that available in two different formats, both the Markdown and the JSON. The JSON importantly includes the location information of where that information is found in the document. So if you need to showcase that alongside your sort of search index, you ultimately can. But just some things to highlight here. We have identified the signature and it has characterized it correctly. And it's brought in sort of the associated details of when ultimately it was signed, including the telephone number associated there. So really great that you're able to pull that information out. But also importantly, you may not want to have a use case that is informing a full index. You may not need the whole full payload from the document. So we also have the capability to pull out a specific schema. And you can select this schema yourself, or you can use the smart schema, which sort of types and identifies the document itself, and then pulls out what it believes to be important information. So that's what I've done with this document here. I've ultimately run that schema, and I'm seeing all of that information being pulled out. And this structured data can obviously be pulled in easily into any system of record or database that I might need to support this patient in the future. And here you just see an example of how our API would leverage that schema. So it's a customizable sort of JSON construction. So, the great news with JSON is it's very universal, ingestible data format. And so that's why we provide that there. So, that's just one way you can use the playground to get a sense of how you might pull information from your documents. I wanted to showcase, and I thought it might be interesting today while we're in this webinar to actually run my presentation through the document extraction tools. A lot of time you go through a lot of different slides and you're like, what really was, the important context from the different overview sections, and how can I potentially feed this into some knowledge base or archive record for supporting, my colleagues in knowing what went on in the webinar without necessarily having to watch the whole video. So of course it processes like the key pieces of text and information very well. And you see, obviously it's hopping to where in the presentation that was selected. But it also is able to analyze and understand sort of different workflow diagrams. So it does describe here, excuse me, that this is a full workflow for an enterprise business process and shows the different nodes and connectors, layout, and analysis. So a very rich way to then have this data available downstream, potentially for use in a chat. So that's what I'm just going to show next. It's another very helpful feature for the visual playground. So here, just in advance, I've asked, what are the key steps in ADE document processing workflows, including data extraction, human review, and integration with downstream systems. Then it's providing, a really great answer here, and then giving me information of like where it's ultimately identifying that in the presentation. So really valuable and just really shows how you might leverage this information in your own chat-based systems. So what we'll switch to next is actually walking through our sort of hands-on demonstration, working with different certificates. So a lot of times, you may have an HR member in your staff that is actually processing this information across all of your different colleagues, and keeping record of, what are the professional development, and especially if it needs to be part of requirements for your ongoing sort of certification in your employment going forward. So now using this tool, they can actually automate that process, so they're not sort of manually reviewing files as they come in. Maybe they're getting emailed daily, and they can just be saved in a folder and ultimately extracted and processed. So here we see that certificate. This is just showing that as available in the visual playground here. But we've also defined a specific schema that is working with, the title, the name, the activity, and the date and credit awarded, which are the really key pieces of information that we want to do and validate, so that our different colleagues are keeping track of their certifications here. You can actually follow along or perform this yourself after the webinar today. So if you go to our helper scripts, this is just available in our public GitHub, github.com, landing-AI /helper scripts. You'll see we have scripts associated with our visual inspection platform, but also with our agentic APIs. And what I'm walking through today is the ones associated. Where did it go? I just pulled this down. It has moved. I will find out where ultimately this helper script went, but it should be back up at some point very soon after the webinar. So then you'd be able to pull down and clone that repo and build it out ultimately yourself. There also is a YouTube video that is direct on our LandingAI YouTube channel that shows this walkthrough from our customer-facing MLE, Andrea, and she does a great job showcasing the power of this here. But here you can see I have my Jupyter, that same notebook, pulled up in a Jupyter Lab on my local machine. So this is my directory here. And what we'll see is parsing through those certificates with ADE. We'll use the custom schema that we identified sort of here. And then view those extractions and save those results to a CSV. So there's some important items that you want to make sure you've installed at the beginning. So here, make sure you do the pip install Agentic doc pillow. You'll run through the standard libraries here. I did just run this 10 minutes ago in case there were internet connectivity issues. I'm not going to run everything live again, but those libraries are then being imported. And then I've actually set my API key here, but you can also save that as an environment key direct in your folder here. And then you're setting up your input and output directories and where ultimately those are saved. So we see all of those folders here. Then you're collecting those file paths. So looking for the different supported formats. And we see those actually in my folder here. So I have those different certificates that I ultimately want to process that I'm pulling in. So there is the full file path sort of printed. And then I'm actually running the document extraction. And there's quite a bit of what you'll see there. First, the checking, is the API key valid, the different documents that are processed. And then you see the different API requests being processed. So there we have our post for agentic document analysis happening. It's moving through the different folder files and parsing the results. So this actually happened really quickly. It sort of hops through all of this. And then we get to the point where those parse results are actually saved. So you can see those actually here. All of those lovely JSON files. And the second one that I saved. All of that beautiful data here. And then we're able to define the custom schema based on that full payload of the whole document. We really care about the recipient name, the issuing org, the activity title, the date awarded, the credit awarded, credit numeric, and the different categories. And so that's just showcasing what the description is for each of them. And then you're across the full payload running that schema. So you call that again. You see that full process here. And you view the results. So you can see the different chunks of text and where it's actually located, like we saw in the visual playground earlier. Quite a bit of content, of course. And then just to show the extracted field items, now we see the more reduced values of the name, Manuel here, the issuing organization, which is Medscape, and the title and the category, etc. We're just sort of making sure we're parsing everything correctly before we then add those values into our CSV. So I see that information here. There's different chunk references available as part of each. So I printing that extracted recipient name and then what that chunk reference actually is. And then based on updating that target chunk reference, then we are reviewing all of the coordinate information and otherwise printing that we can't find that chunk. So there we see that we have identified that here. And then we're printing out just to sanity check the associated metadata with each of the specific fields. So this is looking at sort of the final format here. And then we're converting to a table and saving. So you may need to install pandas to be able to do this. So we're running pandas here. Again, this is the specific dictionary that we're looking for. And then now we see ultimately that output printed, but it's actually saved to that CSV folder here. So I can actually pull that up. This is that save file. And now I have all of that information. Manuel's really been keeping up with his certifications. And again, I could seamlessly automate this by dropping these into a specific folder that the API is running sort of a cron job on daily. And then I don't have to run this myself. So yeah, we just really saw LandingAI's agentic document extraction to parse and extract data from those images and PDFs, define custom fields, and then extract those structured results to a table. And so if you want to replicate this, we will have this back up on our helper scripts page. I do think that just went away just recently, or we can actually send the Jupyter Notebook as part of the follow-on for the webinar as well. But I encourage you to go through a little longer dive in that same setup on our YouTube page ultimately as well. With that, I think I will turn it over to the questions that may have come in.
And we've got some great questions. Thank you, Erica, for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And everyone, thank you for your great questions and keeping us real with these great questions. Let me kick off. First one, can ADE extract rich infographics and analyze and understand the inherent dependencies like your slide with the document processing workflow?
100%. Our sort of goal and where we really add value is enriching very complex data and complex layouts and giving you that as a structured payload. Whether you take the full document JSON or use a structured schema to pull that information out. Exactly how accurate for your specific use case. That's why we encourage you to leverage the visual playground to test out your documents. Everyone gets a certain amount that's available in their account to try out. And then if you have other specific requirements like zero data retention, you can configure those in the different tiers that are available. So that's something just important to point out. This became available, I believe, just early last week. So it's really hot off the press. So you can see that there's organization support for having different users, zero data retention, HIPAA compliancy. That does have to be enabled, and you do have to be on those like starting at that tier. So it's just something to think about dependent upon the data sensitivity for your use case. But thanks for that great question.
Excellent. Next one. Hi there. When are you planning for ADE to be GDPR compliant?
So we do offer that as part of sort of our enterprise tier. So I'd encourage you to have a conversation so we can make sure that the support is exact with your specific needs. I just want to double check that it wasn't listed on our roadmap here. And yeah, it should be available as part of that enterprise plan.
Excellent. Keep in mind that we will follow up with everybody who had questions via email, so we can further explore those conversations. So the API does detect signature Boolean true false, same with signatures. However, it won't extract them since they are not text. Can we use Vision Agent to extract those, or are we left to use machine learning models?
Can you just read through that one again?
Yeah. So the API does detect the signature, parenthesis, begin parentheses, Boolean true false, end parentheses. Same with the signatures. However, it won't extract them since they are not text. Can we use Vision Agent to extract those, or are we left to use machine learning models?
You should be able to extract the text using Vision Agent's full parse feature. I don't know if you saw in the walkthrough I did today. It did identify based on the signature and this location what was the extracted value. So happy to go take a look at your specific case and make sure that we're getting that out correctly.
Excellent. Next question. Do you have ID or face recognition for your financial services?
So I believe that if that is actually a part of the financial institution service, that's not something we're powering. We're focused on more of the document extraction part of that overall pipeline. So hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent. How does the document language influence the quality of document understanding? Begin parentheses. Example, multiple language in Europe with a rather small footprint in LLMs, end parentheses.
So we are continuing to focus on our language support. I have heard just from different customers using the tool, that it is performing really well on a wide variety of languages. You can go to our documentation to review the exact languages supported to understand. But this is also part of the reason why we offer the playground, just to make sure that it is, pulling out as accurately as possible. And if you do uncover that there's some sort of gap, please have a conversation with us, because we're very much, road mapping based on customer input.
The next question may already answer this, but let me just go ahead and read it. What kind of language processing does the document extraction do? Can you not only accurately represent non-Latin characters, begin parentheses, Cyrillic, Chinese, Farsi, Japanese, etc., end parentheses, but also translate to different languages as needed?
So we do offer the ability to perform extraction across different non-Latin languages. That support will probably continue to evolve as we grow. I forget your full list, but I know many of what you stated are supported today. So please feel free to try. And I think your specific request about translation, that's something we could take back as a feature request, because I don't believe that is supported today.
And keep in mind, for everyone that posts their questions, we do share this, and this automatically goes to our product team, so they will review this as well. As Erica mentioned earlier, we take everyone's feedback, and we're really, really active on that. Next question. Great healthcare slide, my domain. So these document types, do you have a script separately, or do you combine everything in one script as part of the pipeline?
So our goal ultimately is to minimize the amount of decisioning you're having to do in building out your pipeline. So it is a proprietary agentic layer that should help identify the document type and then pull out the specific values. So I'd encourage you to test and see, how that is working. We do also offer document typing. So there's a specific API that is newer, that has come out. So if you needed, based on the specific, health document type, you could pull out different schemas from those documents. I would encourage you to try that in the API as well.
Great answer. Did you say that it is possible with ADE to prepare the data to be inserted in a database? I mean, is ADE can be parameterized to generate an SQL query that will launch on a database? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if the ultimate downstream system is a database, the JSON payload, whether that is from the full set of metadata, or full set of document JSON, or individual schema, that can be easily brought into most database systems. It's a RESTful API, so if your database can work with that API, it's likely those values can be brought in. You can see that what's roadmapped in the future is focusing a little bit on data normalization and validation, which might help facilitate integrating into that downstream system faster. But you should also be able to get that payload and then do any transformation to integrate with the existing RESTful API.
Excellent. Can ADE recognize and name individual components in a technical drawing? Example, nuts, bolts, ceilings, etc.
That is an area that we're focused on improving, is looking at the technical drawing extraction. You can see that sort of plotted with the advanced chart extraction as sort of coupled together. I've seen very good results with technical drawings and identifying the different components, and even being able to sort of understand the key and legend that is associated with that technical drawing. So it's worth just trying. There probably is an upper level of complexity where it wouldn't work as well. But definitely try the tool and see the results, and then raise your hand and have a conversation if you're not getting what ultimately you need.
We have time for a few more questions. We'll wrap up. How much difference the use of knowledge graph databases does comparing to the native indexing vector databases? Does it really enhance it?
You know, I am not 100% because that ultimately is the customer or enterprise owner that is working through that process. So I think it's just really dependent upon their individual requirements, and what existing technologies they already use and maybe have solutions already built in.
Excellent. We have time for just one or two more questions. How does ADE improve over traditional OCR?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because this is a new technology comparative to OCR, and like most everyone is familiar with OCR and ultimately how it works. But because our solution is based on the overall document, and it's vision based to really understand the layout structure as well as the different components within the document, such as a figure, a text chunk, a chart. It really enriches what is available downstream from that document. So it's really beyond OCR because you are interpreting layout, tables, images, form fields, and also the semantic relationships in those documents. And you don't need to do that by defining a specific template, or even in some systems that aren't template based that are doing training. This is sort of a zero shot approach. You're really able to deliver rich, structured information with visual grounding that's just leaps and bounds above OCR.
Last question. Which document elements can ADE automatically identify and extract?
Yeah, that's a great question. We sort of automatically, and you can even test this by going into the visual playground yourself. You can see sort of which sections are identified as sort of text. There's like identifying the marginalia in the document. But we're able to detect all sorts of elements like text tables, form fields, checkboxes. We can even interpret sort of hierarchical relationships, and truly complex layouts. But there's sort of a different answer between like what is identified and read and sort of pulled out in the document, and then also like how that might be classified from our API. So.
Excellent. Last question. Is the notebook available?
Yes. So apologies. I did check earlier today and it was there. So I'll make sure it is end up placed back in the repo. There was a couple updates to how we refer to the chunk references, and those just need to be pulled through a PR. So apologies. We will make that available.
To everyone who attended today, thank you for joining us for our Wednesday webinar. We will be kicking off a whole new series on September 10th. Look for it to be posted on LinkedIn, our website. It'll actually run this time every morning starting September 10th, Wednesday, for 5 weeks. It'll be hosted by both Erica Gilbert and Andrea Kropp. And for housekeeping, we'll send out the recordings, the slide decks, adjacent information starting tomorrow and Friday. If you have any questions or you'd like to chat with us prior to, I dropped our sales alias in the chat function. Feel free to ping us and we'll get a meeting scheduled. Erica, as always, thank you for being an awesome partner. This is a great webinar, great presentation. And as always, we appreciate your time and your knowledge. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.